What's going on, guys? In today's video I'm going to show you how to change a tire on your vehicle. Now the car that we're using today is a beautiful 2013 Kia Rio, the little sports car that it is. Not really, but it does the job. And I am going to be switching over my winter tires to my summer tires, which in my opinion will make the car look a lot nicer. As you can see, it's sunny outside finally, so we have to get this done. Really the only materials that you will need is a floor jack, a tire iron, and a jack stand. Now the first thing we're going to do is make sure our emergency brake is up. And this is just to prevent the car from rolling backwards. There it is, it's already up. And if you drive stick, what you can do is just put the car in first gear, which will lock your front tires when you jack the car up. As a secondary safety precaution or measure, you could also take a brake like this and throw it behind the back wheels, and that will just prevent your car from rolling back if for some reason the emergency brake fails, which likely would not happen, but you can never be too safe. So what we're going to do now is loosen up the lug nuts, and we're going to loosen them to a point where you could kind of move them by hand, but you don't want to take them off completely. And the best way to do this is while the car is still on the ground. Now the tire iron that I have right here is a great little device. It actually extends outwards, so you don't need a breaker bar. Sometimes in our Canadian winters the salt gets in behind these lug nuts. I don't know how it does that, but it does, and it makes removing the tire a bit more difficult. You may have to kick it or really get some force on it. But at the end of the day, it's not a huge problem, and it could be fairly easily overcome. Now that we have our lug nuts loosened up a bit, what we're going to do is find our designated lifting point underneath the vehicle. And this is actually included within most owner's manuals, but here's mine right here, where these two indents are. That's the designated lifting point along the frame rail. And what I use is a hockey puck that I'll put on my jack and use it as a buffer between the jack and the actual frame rail, so I don't bend or kind of chip anything away. Now, as another safety measure, I'm going to put this floor jack also underneath the frame rail, just in case my my regular jack fails. So here we go. As you can see, I got my rubber hockey puck on top of my jack. It's a low pro jack, which is great. It pretty much works on all cars, good for up to 2 tons. So lifting this little Kia Rio is really nothing. Making sure everything is lined up properly, and we'll start by lifting it slowly. So we're going to lift the car to the point in which we can just slide the jack stand underneath. It doesn't have to go too high. We're only changing a tire out, so we don't need much room between the actual tire once the suspension drops and the floor. So here we have it. The tire or the car is now lifted, and we are ready to start taking these lug nuts off. Alright, now that we have all the lug nuts removed, we're going to go ahead and remove the winter tire. You may have to give it a little hit just because it corrodes due to the winter salt. And we'll get rid of this winter tire here. And just since the tire's off, you can give a little inspection, make sure everything looks right, everything is moving around nicely and smooth. The brake caliper looks fairly decent, not too much rust on it. And the rotor itself is relatively new, so I don't have to do too much work to that as well. There's a little surface rust, which I'll get rid of at a later date. Just making sure there's no scuffs or grooves that shouldn't be there. So now that all is good, we're going to get that summer tire on there. With this one, it's a little bit tricky because there's a bunch of holes in there, depending on what pattern you have on your hub. And another important thing is to make sure that if you have directional tires, that they are pointing in the right direction. If they're not, and you hit a puddle of water, the probability of you hydroplaning will be a lot greater, just because directional tires are meant to go one way and they disperse water in a certain direction. So just make sure they are facing the right way. So let's go ahead and start putting these new lug nuts on. A little bit difficult with this rim, just because the lugs are actually recessed. So in this situation, I have to kind of just jimmy it around until everything seats right. Now the first lug that you put on, this is actually pretty important. You don't want to torque it down all the way. You could bring it down to about hand torque or just a little bit tight. If you go too much, you may pull or distort the hub and everything will not seat properly. So let's go ahead and put all the other ones on, get them down to a decent tightness, and then we'll lower the car and torque them properly. And we're good to go. So what we're going to do is pull the floor stand out and slowly lower the car. Alright, so now the car is now lowered. What we want to do is torque the lug nuts to our manufacturer recommended torque using a torque wrench. And I picked this up for about 60 bucks at Canadian Tire. Great device, well worth it. And in our situation here, I typically like to torque my wheels to about 85 to 90 and that is in foot-pounds, not inches. Every car actually has a different torque rating for the wheels, so I do recommend that you either go online to the manufacturer's website or look in your owner's manual, which will likely give you the information required for your model and your car specifically. So now let's go ahead and start torquing these lug nuts down to the required torque, And that's really all that's required. So let's finish that up here. You don't want to over torque them. If you do, you could damage the wheel, and you could actually even damage your torque wrench. Once you hear that single click or a pop, that means you are good to go. And that's all there's to it, guys. If you guys have any questions or any comments about this video, feel free to leave them in the section below, and I will definitely do my best to help you out. If you like this video, feel free to give us a thumbs up or hit that subscribe button. It always helps, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.